Is the answer to those questions, which is our primary focus and what do we do about the other three, is that written down somewhere? Remember that if it's not written down somewhere official, like in an information security handbook for the company or some such thing, then it doesn't count. Okay? The second question. Have we completed and documented an InfoSec risk analysis to include an inventory of all information assets and associated risks, mitigation strategies, and costs? So, just like the chart that we presented here in this lecture, have we done that? Have we made that chart for the information assets and the risks that we can identify associated with those information assets? Okay, again, and is the chart written down somewhere? Is that recorded someplace? And then question 3 in the manager's audit for domain number 1 here. Do we have a written security policy signed by a senior manager in the company? Okay, does this policy address at least the following? So the policy must address at least the following points. Number 1, the implementation of information security, specifically who is responsible, when does it happen, how will it happen? Okay. The enforcement, does it provide for the enforcement of the policy? Okay. Number 3, is there an explanation of why this policy is needed? Some sort of purpose statement in this policy letter. Okay. Some mention of scope, what the policy covers. Okay, and who are the responsible agents for information security in the company, and how will violations be handled? Okay, so you need to remember, keep this policy concise. The policy wants to only be 1, 2, or 3 typewritten pages. It's not a voluminous document. Okay, question number 4. Do we have written InfoSec procedures that document how to handle security issues and violations for each information asset? Okay, again, are these procedures written down? That's really what you're asking. If they're not written down and cataloged someplace where people can find them relatively easily when they have a need to know and when they need to get to them, then they exist. If they're not written down and not easily accessible, then they don't exist. Okay, number 5. Do we have written InfoSec standards that give broad instructions for addressing issues and violations that may occur for any information asset? In other words, do we have standards that say if our procedure doesn't specifically cover this point, then the standard for this information asset should be applied? Okay, and then number 6. Do we have written InfoSec guidelines that give the broad concepts that we use for addressing information security issues that may arise that are not explicitly addressed by either our policy, our procedures, and our standards? So that's the safety net, so to speak. Broad general guidelines that say if the issue that you're concerned about is not addressed anywhere else, here's how we would go about resolving that. And then question number 7, relative to levels of control, do we have controls that provide a good balance between the level of control and the usability of our information assets under each of these controls? Okay, and then number 8, do we have systematic procedures and checks that we really do execute to ensure we're complying with our own information security policies, procedures, standards, and guidelines? Okay, and so this, of course, is the due diligence question, or one of them. And so to do this, again, we would specify such things as quarterly training and annual evaluations and disciplinary actions for those who do not carry out rules of the company, and testing requirements before hiring, and announced and surprised audits, background checks, other such things. So those are the questions that we recommend relative to domain number 1. Some of the domains, fortunately, are going to be easier than domain number 1. Domain number 1 is a lot of work because the information security risk assessment and all of the written policies, procedures, standards, and guidelines are all part of domain number 1, and that can be an enormous amount of work. So as we look at domain number 1, I encourage you not to get discouraged and say, oh wow, I'm only 1/10 of the way through this thing, and I'm already feeling like I'm drinking from a fire hydrant. No, let me encourage you, the rest of them, for the most part, are easier than this, some of them much easier than domain number 1. And I do grant you that being in compliance with domain number 1 is a lot of work, but again, information security is important, and this is a way to help ensure that you've done proper management of your information security. We now turn our attention to the second domain, security architecture and models. The second domain illustrates the concepts, principles, and standards for the development and implementation of secure applications, operation systems, and information systems. Okay, we will focus here on the principle of least privilege, on security models, and on threats to security models. Okay, let's talk first about the principle of least privilege. It's also known as the need to know principle. It defines a user's privileges to be no more than what is necessary to successfully fulfill a function. A function can be a process or resource that a user has access to or uses to perform daily tasks. When we talk about security models, they are employed for the protection of processes or resources. And we'll take a look at 3 security models, the Bell-LaPadula, the Clark-Wilson, and the BIBA. Each of the security models represents one or more of the elements found in the CIA triad. And that is to say that the security model that you select will have to match the security principle that you want to focus on. Now, let's talk first about the Bell-LaPadula model. Those of you who have had experience in the military or the government, you should know that that's the security model that the government uses. They have a system where you have top secret, secret, confidential, and unclassified. And basically, users can only see their level and below. So somebody with a secret clearance can only see secret documents, confidential documents, and unclassified documents, but that person is not allowed to see top secret documents. Somebody who has confidential clearance, for instance, can only see confidential documents and unclassified documents. Somebody with a top secret security clearance could see all levels of classification. So we say that you can only see at your level and below, and when you write, you can only write for your level and above. So somebody with secret clearance, it is assumed that when they write on an issue that they're writing at the secret level, or they're writing for something that's going to be integrated into a top secret document. But it would be potentially dangerous for somebody with a secret clearance to be writing extensively about some issue that they have secret access to, and for that then to be viewed by somebody at a lower security level. So, which aspect of the CIA triad does Bell-LaPadula address? Is it confidentiality? Is it integrity? Is it availability or accountability? All right. Then we look at the Clark-Wilson model. Clark-Wilson preserves the integrity of information